we are at our final speaker of the evening or afternoon. Actually, yeah, time zones. Yeah, we're ending, last but not least, with Andrea of Infinite Polyam. Andrea has been polyamorous for over 20 years, and she's here to share her journey and how she feels that polyamory has evolved over time. So I'm going to unmute you and spotlight. There we go. When you're ready.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for all that you have donated for Palestinians. I'm Andrea, and I live in Houston, Texas. I've been practicing polyamory about for 22 years, since I was maybe 19 years old. And although as a young teenager, I always wanted another boyfriend every time I had one, and I never understood those types of norms. They were very confusing to me. So I also say I've always been polyamorous. I'm going to also discuss how polyamory has changed for me over the years. My now husband and I had conversations practically from the beginning that monogamy didn't feel right, but neither of us really knew what to do with that information. So it was a roughly year or two process to becoming officially open. And what's funny is since we met young, one of our original conversations was about not having later in life regrets when we were in our 40s with kids. And sometimes when I look back on that now, I'm like, oh, so like now. That was still the day of dial-up internet and encyclopedias. So neither of us had the language of polyamory at the time. We didn't know anyone who was non-monogamous in any capacity. The ethical slut did exist, but we didn't know that. So we went in blind and lived and learned a lot along the way. Had I had more polyamory resources available to me, I believe this would have looked very different early on. This is one reason I'm very outspoken about sharing some of my past experiences, both positive and negative. What started as an open relationship that was sexually open and emotionally closed evolved more into polyamory over time. I was casually dating someone and I started to fall in love with him. But as this went against the agreement, I told my husband, and I knew I would have to end it with my casual partner. But my husband just chuckled, and then he was like, "Feel your feelings." And so I usually kind of define that as when it changed to polyamory instead of an open relationship. But in reality, had I had those early resources, I believe it would have looked different even early on. So I never had a reason to question that before that because I think I just never got to that place in a relationship with anyone before this partner. And that turned out to be a very long lasting, very fulfilling relationship. While I was in that relationship, I finally started breaking down some things that I had never previously addressed. I never had a reason to. I wasn't aware of those things like couples privilege, hierarchy, mononormativity. And that goes back to the lack of resources. And so I think I skipped a lot of steps that led to some unhealthy ways. And then it was about that time that I started seeking more resources because they were better available by that point. So I am very open about it now, but I was mostly closeted until about 5 years ago. Prior to that, only those very close to me knew. I had so much internalized shame, and I was very isolated in my non-monogamy. Around that time, about 5 years ago, I started becoming more active in my local community, which I had previously shied away from. And soon after, I started posting polyamory content on social media. Initially, I viewed non monogamy as a temporary thing for me, and it was far more sex based than any emotional component. That was very early on for me, and I'm sure my age played a part in that as well. Early on, I wasn't very concerned about compatibility outside of just the sexual compatibility. And as time has gone on for me, I find that I'm very rarely interested in dating new people. I just don't date new people very often, period. But when I do, compatibility overall is what's very important. And actually, the sexual component is not important to me very much in the way that it used to be. My polyamory experiences really have just been a huge path of self-discovery over the years. It first felt like a thing I do, but as I learned more about myself, I knew this is who I am. So currently, I have two long-term partners that are very, um, and there are different things with them that I never had to think about before. such as like if there's a medical emergency, including a hospital stay that involves a meta having to communicate those details. Like those are things that in prior relationships were never an issue. And now those are things that have been real circumstances that I've had to consider, like actually how do we handle this? What do we do? And so we've had to actually have conversations about that. And so the last decade or so has seen a huge increase in polyamory resources, and they just continue getting better and better as there's a better understanding. And it's great that people newer to polyamory have those resources, whether it's a book, podcast, blog, reel, anything. I personally have a better acceptance from others in my personal life more recently, but I also don't put up with as much BS as I used to. I hear some people say things indicating that polyamory is a new thing that people are doing, but it's not at all new. We could get into a deep dive of history, but that's a long topic for another day. Many just didn't feel safe and comfortable coming out, and many still aren't out. More people are realizing this is an option and that monogamy is not the only way to have happy, healthy relationships. So it seems to be both becoming more common and more visible. I'm going to wrap it up here because I think I've actually already gone a little bit over time. Thank you so much to everyone for being here, to Leanne for organizing, to all the other speakers, and Free Palestine. Thank you.